Well, I talked about before making this video on the attitudinal foundations of mindfulness, as articulated by Jon Kabat-Zinn, um, which I think is written all in a very accessible way. There are 7 of them, and they're not in a certain order necessarily. There's not one that's more important than the other. They kind of all work together. They're not mutually exclusive, and they're all important. And we could probably do longer videos on each individual one. But I thought I'd run through them, and I think it's useful uh, in an attempt to, this is you bring these attitudes to your practice and to your life, and hopefully, doing all that work together, you're cultivating, that what we're talk about mindfulness, being at peace, being able to be in the present moment, and I found these extremely helpful when in my practice, and it's a lifelong work. You got to constantly revisit these and reinforce these, and and so with that said, in the list I have, number 1 is non-judging, uh, and it talks about taking the stance of an impartial witness to your own experience. So I talk about this during meditations often, about letting go of the judging mind, not labeling things as good or bad or neutral, just noticing what is, without adding that coloring, that judgment to it. And so that's very important to bring that to, that attitude to your practice and to your life. Patience. So letting things unfold in their own time. He has this cool kind of example, or there's a written example, at least on the sheet that I used to always use when I was teaching mindfulness, where it says a child might try to help a butterfly emerge by breaking open a chrysalis, but chances are the butterfly won't benefit from this type of help. So letting things develop in their own time. And another thing I like talking about in this context is, we could spend our whole life trying to rush through this moment that's, maybe we're at work or we're doing something that's not fun, and we want to rush to the fun part. You want to rush the week to get to the weekend. But ultimately, what ends up happening is we're end up missing out on a huge portion of our life if we're always rushing through this moment to get to the next moment. So patience, being present, in this moment, things as they are, and not trying to rush to the result. This is a big problem I have, actually. I like to rush. I like to get to the destination. I like to rush through a project so I have a final product. Rush through a video so I have a video done. Rush through writing a song so it has and sometimes you end up getting it, maybe not what could have been the best outcome. So, but it's hard. It goes against sometimes some of our nature, but that's really important. Third, beginner's mind. This is a good one. Like I said, you can't say one's better than the other. They all work together, but this is often come to my mind. So beginner's mind is approaching every scenario, situation, event, or whether as if it's never, you don't know what's going to happen. It's never happened before. So good examples. Well, when I was a doctor seeing patients, maybe there's a patient on my schedule that, oh man, I know they're a tough one. This is going to be painful. And so I'd see that on my schedule and I'd start suffering immediately. And sometimes you would get to those appointments and things went just fine and they were great and it was pleasant. And so beginner's mind is like letting go of that conceived notion that it's gonna be a certain way. So when you see that thing, when you're walking down the street, you see somebody you don't want to talk to. Instead of starting to suffer, oh my God, what am I? I don't be like, nah, let's just see what happens. That's the attitude. That's the beginner's mind attitude, and you end up suffering a lot less. It's like that old, you died 1,000 deaths. It's like, okay, because you're basically ruminating and worrying about how bad these things are going to be. And actually, you never know. Sometimes you think something's going to be awesome and fun and smooth, and it's horrible. At least it feels that way. It's a judgment, but And so, you know, there's, thousands of people have had quotes that are similar. So, but, that can save you a lot of suffering. It's just having a beginner's mind, just seeing what's going to happen. Trust. This is a tough one. Says developing a basic trust in yourself and your feelings, trusting in your own authority and intuition, even if you make some mistakes along the way. Honor your feelings, taking responsibility for yourself and your own well being. Um, so, but yeah, listening to that inner voice, and you might not always get it right, but believing in yourself, trusting yourself. I mean, all of us are alive, uh, if you're listening to this right, and you have a lot of life experience, and you've probably learned a few things, even if you don't realize it. So listen to yourself. How many times have you not listened to yourself and then afterwards think, oh man, I should have followed my instincts. I knew that was a bad idea or whatever. So non-striving is the next one. That's a tough one. So here on that sheet, it's what it says. Meditation has no goal other than for you to be yourself. The irony is you already are. Paying attention to how you are right now, however that is, just watch. The best way to achieve your goals is to back off from the striving and instead start to really focus, carefully seeing and accepting things as they are, moment by moment, with patience and regular practice, moving towards your goals. So the way I think about non-striving is sometimes the striving can be you're so into the mental aspect of it and the rumination and the, oh, I gotta accomplish all these things, gotta do all this stuff. That can cause a lot of frustration. It could cause you to make mistakes. Um, it can cause you to suffer because you're worrying about it. When maybe being more process based, just experiencing it as you go. So non-striving doesn't mean you can't have goals, and it doesn't mean you can't, in some sense, the overall big picture, striving for something, whether that's just success, and depending on how you want to define that. But I feel like it's like sometimes you ever know, but you feel like you're trying so hard that you're screwing things up. It's like the Chinese finger traps or handcuffs. You put your fingers in there. If you pull really hard, you can't get out. But if you gently push together and gently remove, So that's why I feel like it. That's the way I think of non-striving. Sometimes if you try too hard, you just create resistance and stress, and makes it harder. Number 6 is acceptance, seeing things as they actually are. They are in the present moment. For instance, if you have a headache, accept that you have a headache. That's actually pretty crucial. In my work as a somebody who's helped people through chronic pain, the mental aspect, pain reprocessing therapy, and as a personal sufferer of chronic migraines, growing up pretty severe, that was something I learned. You would start. Those of you who've had a history of migraines, you know what happens. You start to get just a little bit, or you even have a sensation. You feel a certain way. You're going to get it, and what happens? You start to stress about it. You start to worry about it, and really, what you're doing is you don't want to have a headache. So you start fighting against that, and that's a sure way to get a severe and worse headache. So, um, if you're like, oh, I can feel that might come on. This is one of those days. Instead of tensing up and bracing for it, which causes more, you know, strain, stress, and can lead to worse headaches. You're like, ah, okay, you know, there it is. Think about Rumi and his poem, The Guest House, which I don't have in front of me, but if you've ever read that, he kind of talks about, this life as a guest house and treat all visitors as welcome guests, and talks about just laying out the welcome mat. And so sometimes if you do that, if you take that attitude, you might be surprised what the outcome could be. I'm sure there's some neuroscience behind how that affects your autonomic nervous system, and that can potentially have a less painful experience than you would have otherwise. Um, but I'm not getting into pain reprocessing therapy here because mindfulness is different. And although they work well together, there are a very different approach to how you think of things. But yeah, accepting things as they are can reduce the suffering, the tension we create. When we want things to be different, we cause ourselves a lot of suffering. And we could go in, there's a lot of notes on acceptance. And like I said, we could probably do individual videos on each one of these things. And last on here is letting go. So letting go is a way of letting things be, of accepting things as they are. You'll see there's a lot of overlap between these, by the way, but that's okay. They kind of work together, or they definitely work together. They're all important. They're all working at the same time, these attitudes. We let things go and we just watch. And if we find it particularly difficult to let go something because it has such a strong hold on our mind, we can direct our attention to what holding feels like. Holding on the opposite is the opposite of letting go. Being willing to take a look at the ways we hold on shows us a lot about the opposite. And then in my notes here, it says, you already know how to let go. Every night when you go to sleep, we let go. Now, somebody who suffers chronic insomnia might not feel that way. There's a story, and I'm sure it's probably been told in other places, but in Full Catastrophe Living, Jon Kabat-Zinn's like big tech, it's essentially, it's a book, it's a textbook on his approach in his 8-week course of mindfulness-based stress reduction, but talks about how, I believe it was somewhere in Africa, the way that they would hunt monkeys is they would cut open like a hole and empty out a coconut. It'd be a small hole that a relaxed hand could fit through, and they would put a banana in there, and the monkeys would reach in there and they grab the banana, but then they'd be trapped because they wouldn't let go of the banana. Their fist couldn't fit through the hole that their relaxed hand could fit through, and this would be attached to a tree or something. And then the hunters would be able to catch the monkeys that way. But if the monkey could just let go, their hand would slip out and they would be free. So it's kind of a metaphor of how holding on can be very detrimental, in this case, to your life, if you're a monkey with a banana and a coconut. But letting go. So, I could think of many other ways you could think of that. When you hold on to something, when you won't let it go, a lot of people had experience with how forgiveness can set you free. Because if you're not forgiving somebody, if you're still holding a grudge from something, that's a type of holding on. And forgiveness is a type of letting go. Or, sometimes maybe things in life just don't happen the way that we had wanted so badly for them to happen. And sometimes you just got to let go of what you were holding on to, let go of your idea of how your life was going to be. Not because it doesn't suck, because this is not about toxic positivity. This is not about positive thinking, because we're seeing things as they are. But yeah, you can reduce suffering quite a bit by letting go, being comfortable. All of these things take practice, by the way, just like mindfulness, and these are a part of that. The more you practice, the better you get at it. You can get really good at it and practice really intensely. I'd say several years ago when I was really hitting this work hard, and things felt pretty darn good. And then you hit years where, for whatever reason, you fall off your practice, and then you lose it. You're not using it. You're not as good at it. So it takes practice, and none of us are perfect, and all of us, our practice will be up and down. But remembering these, reviewing these, revisiting these has been extremely helpful for me in my mindfulness journey, and so, but yeah, maybe we'll do individual videos on these as time goes on. And if there's any interest, if anybody ever watches any of these videos and makes comments. So, all right. Thanks for spending this time with me. And if you are somebody watching this video, write a comment if you're interested in talking more.